In honour of her French heritage, Mary Stuart changed the spelling of her name from the Scottish way, Stewart, to the French version, Stuart, and therefore you will find two spellings of the Stuart name in the history books, before and after Mary's arrival in Scotland in 1561. Without her husband or her mother, Mary may well have considered looking to England for comfort, where her cousin Elizabeth had been queen since 1558. However, Elizabeth had already developed a deep distrust of Mary, through circumstances beyond the Scottish queen's control. When Elizabeth was crowned, the Catholics believed she had no right to rule, and urged Mary to step forward as the only legitimate and Catholic heir to the throne of England. It was the start of a troubled relationship between the two women that would without doubt damage them both. So Mary followed her own course, taking her rightful place as Queen of Scotland, vowing that she would continue in her mother's footsteps and keep the peace between the feuding Scottish noble lords. Also, religious differences were causing all sorts of problems in Scotland as well. Just a year before Mary's arrival, the Scottish Reformation, led by the fiery preacher John Knox, declared Scotland Protestant. As Mary herself was a devout Catholic, she advocated a policy of religious tolerance, but John Knox was not inclined to return the favour. In general, Queen Mary seemed to be getting by with little need for strong-arm tactics, while her gentle approach and charming French manners helped the people warm to her, with one notable exception, the Protestant reformer, John Knox. At the time of Queen Mary's return, he was Edinburgh's most powerful minister, based at Edinburgh's magnificent St. Giles Cathedral, an awe-inspiring Gothic edifice from where he used to rant and rave in his sermons about the frivolity and heresy of the Scottish Queen. Remember, she was young, attractive, and used to being flattered and adored, but the pious clergyman was having none of it. Knox published pamphlets like the First Blast of the Trumpet against the Monstrous Regiment of Women, in which he attacked and argued against a female monarch, writing that female rulers were most odious in the presence of God, and were undeniably traitors and rebels against the Almighty. John Knox certainly proved to be a thorn in Mary's flesh, and to this day you can still visit his imposing house, now a museum, on Edinburgh's Royal Mile, not far from where he presided over the pulpit in St. Giles Cathedral. Incidentally, the Royal Mile is the name of the road that joins the magnificent fortress that is Edinburgh Castle with the grandeur of Holyrood Palace, and Mary Queen of Scots would come to know both royal houses very well indeed, in the first instance making her home at Holyrood. In fact, it was in this very palace that Mary quite suddenly, and some would say inexplicably, married her first cousin, Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley. At first, the people of Scotland were shocked by their queen's rash behaviour, but Mary knew they would quickly get used to the idea, especially if she could produce a son and heir for the nation. Despite her efforts since arriving, the Scottish lords had continually battled against each other, but a Stuart prince would keep the Scottish crown safe, whatever happened. In retrospect, it's hard to imagine why Mary chose to marry Darnley, an immature, unpopular 19-year-old who was known to have a particularly unpleasant, violent streak. But perhaps she simply made the best of a bad lot. At least Darnley had royal blood and could be controlled, or so Mary might have thought, as he was only crowned king consort, which essentially meant he had the title of king, but none of the powers. Darnley was, however, eager to make such an advantageous match, hoping to eventually rule England as well as Scotland, as it was likely that if Elizabeth I did not marry and have children of her own, Mary would by default become the English Queen's heir.